Welcome and thank you all for attending the program tonight. I'm Ahmad Mirza. I'm a librarian here with the Santa Barbara Public Library. We're excited to have one of our most popular programs back here at the library. There's quite a bit of exploration out there to see, especially in our own backyard. And with things opening up and more people heading outdoors, this program does serve as a great resource to us all. So we really appreciate all the speakers that we have lined up. Just want to make a few library announcements before we begin. We have the next two Trail Talks scheduled on the calendar. So if you want to mark your calendars, August 26th is the next one. That one will be with Sarah Dykman and her talk, Bicycling with Butterflies. It's about the migration of the monarch butterflies and a 10,000-mile journey. Definitely sounds pretty cool. So we'll check that one out. And the next one also following month, September 16th, if you want to mark your calendars as well for that, we have the hot and cold backcountry springs of the Santa Barbara and Ojai Mountains. And that's with James Wapwatich leading that discussion. So very, very, very excited for these talks here. Before I introduce our speaker this evening, I wanted to say to anyone who has any questions during the presentation or throughout the presentation, please, if you want, you can just put them in the chat. If we have time at the end of the presentation, that we'll try to get to some of the questions. This presentation is recorded and we plan to put it on the library YouTube page. For those that are registered with the library, we will be sending out a link, hopefully with the registration for the next event, as well as the link to the YouTube as well, the library's YouTube. Now, I want to shift gears here. I want to now introduce our speaker this evening, Craig Carey. Craig is an avid wanderer of the local backcountry. Craig is also the author of the newly revised Hiking and Backpacking Santa Barbara and Ventura, a complete guide to the trails of the southern Los Padres National Forest.
That is a mouthful.
It is. It definitely. I'm winded already just by that. No,
sorry,
I got
man.
my hike in. We do have a few copies of this new revised book in our catalog at the library. Definitely check it out if you can. If you want to, please do. Definitely. And if you want to follow up and check out Craig's trip reports and other news and updates and resources, check out Craig's website, Craig R, the letter R, Carey.net. And with that, I want to pass the floor to Craig, but I mean, with the presentation, and let me try the title out here. No judgment. So we're doing it. Look out!
Perfect. Oh, that was beautiful.
Look out, towers of the southern Los Padres. Sorry if I affected anyone's headphones with that one.
Yeah, I think I blew my left headphone out there. Right on. That was great. Thanks, Ahmad. Thank you for the super enthusiastic introduction. I love it.
I'm excited. This is fun.
Yeah, no, I'm excited too. This is great, and it's funny because well, sort of funny. The opportunity to speak to fellow hikers feels like it's been crazily reduced with everybody, kind of sequestered into their homes and whatnot. But I love using this Zoom technology, which is, bored coworkers to death and kids are tired of it. But it's a great means to reach other hikers whilst we still have to do it this way. So I appreciate you putting this together, and thanks to the Santa Barbara Library. Thanks to James for kind of coordinating all the hiker speaker series as well. So good evening, my party peeps. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about, as Ahmad was so enthusiastically articulating, we're going to talk about some of the lookouts of the southern Los Padres National Forest. So what I'm going to do here is share my screen in just a sec. Stand by while I figure that out. Yikes, what just happened? All right, stand by while I show my age by having technical difficulties. And Ahmad, this should be the one slideshow that we're looking for.
That is it.
All right, good. And then I'll move all my other stuff to the other screen so I don't so people aren't looking at me more than once, because nobody deserves that. All right. So this evening we're going to talk about lookout towers of the southern Los Padres. And as I was chatting with Ahmad earlier, lookout towers they're a cool relic of the Los Padres, obviously with technology and cell phones and satellites and helicopters and all that. Lookouts, they're really, they're a relic of an era of the forest long past. And when we talk about archaeology, obviously, we're usually talking about, Chumash archaeology or Rancho era history and whatnot. And most lookouts are from the 20s and 30s, so not even 100 years old. But I really love the history of them. And there are a lot of elements deep in the Los Padres that somebody can kind of latch onto and be a fan of, right? Before the Wilderness Act in the 1960s, man had a huge presence in most of the forest if it could be accessed. Some people are really into the old historical signage of the forest. I love this one. This is pre-1936 because it's back when the Los Padres was known as the Santa Barbara National Forest. And sometimes you'll come across these signs almost literally in the middle of nowhere, and they point to things that no longer exist in the forest, right? It says, oh, well, you can get this way to this cabin and you'll go that way to this lookout and that way to this cabin. And a lot of those features in the last 100 years, largely due to fire, sometimes due to, just negligence and age, no longer exist. Some people are really and the this photo is from the 20s and goes to show that it's not a new phenomenon that people shoot up forest signs. They've been getting shot up since signs been put up, right? There were also several buildings deep in the forest. This is Pine Mountain Lodge in what is now the Sespe Wilderness along the Pine Mountain Massif. It was popular with a group of hunters known locally as the Sisquoc Rangers, one of which included the author of the Perry Mason novels, Earl Stanley Gardner, who lived in Ventura for a time and joined this crew. Great little cabin, the very minor ruins of which you can still see there as you climb the Piedra Blanca Gene Marshall National Recreation Trail. Shout out to the Los Padres Forest Association for their huge project recently renovating that trail. Thank you, guys. Those of you who hike in the San Raf Wilderness and in the Sisquoc and Manzana backcountry will know, there's several buildings still there, right? The schoolhouse is probably the most famous. The South Fork Guard Station is real popular with campers because it gives you the ability to, stay in a cabin after a 10-mile, pretty tough hike. I love the historical photo, though, on the right. This is while it was under construction in 1937. A lot of what they used to consider the infrastructure and the buildings on the forest, as they would say, they don't say in the forest, on the forest, were built during the New Deal and the WPA programs, putting young men back to work during the Depression. There are places like Alomar Station along the Buckhorn Big Pine Road. For those who frequent southern Kern County and have been up to Cerro Noroeste, that beautiful old ski lodge there at the top of the mountain. It's a photo of the guys building it in the 40s here. Various cabins along the Sisquoc. Those in the eastern Sespe Wilderness might be familiar with the old McDonald cabin, which was a real treat to visit until the Day Fire when that burned in 2006. The old Alomar Tin Shack that burned in the Zaca Fire. We still have a couple outbuildings in the Sespe, what's left of the old Willett and Lagomarsino leases. So you'll see the old tack sheds, the old Lagomarsino cabin still usable with a fairly decent interior. And then what was probably the crown jewel of a lot of these structures was the Medulce cabin, which burned in 99. But some of the remains of which are still visible in the Dick Smith Wilderness if you come up Santa Barbara Canyon. But nearest and dearest to my heart, and my favorite, what we're going to talk about tonight, are the lookout towers of the Southern Los Padres. And most of these were built in the 20s and 30s. They served more than just, fire lookout purposes, and we'll talk about that a little bit here. And there are a handful, like literally 4 or 5, remaining that you can still visit. And then even fewer, maybe 2 or 3 that you can actually still go up inside and view. My favorite being, and I won't lie, Thorn Point, and for a few reasons. Thorn Point was built in 1934. It was a very typical of the time structure, 20-foot high K-brace frame with a 14 by 14 foot cab footprint and a cabin up top. The photo shown on the left is from, I think September 2013, when I was working on a micro trash cleanup service project. And you see there's a little cabin down on the bottom left. And that was what they call the AWS cabin, which is the Aircraft Warning System or Service. And shortly after Pearl Harbor, the Army Air Corps and the Army realized, and the War Department realized, yikes, what if the Imperial Japanese Army attacked the mainland, which of course those of you living in Goleta and Santa Barbara know did happen with the shelling of Elwood Mesa. But on a larger scale, they were expecting, any moment the Zeros could be coming over the Channel Islands headed for the mainland. So they pressed all the fire lookout towers, most of the fire lookout towers, from Baja, Mexico, all the way up through British Columbia and into Alaska, into airplane spotting towers. Even my grandma, who was living in Silver Lake at the time, worked as a spotter at San Pedro Harbor and at Mount Wilson, with her little doughboy hat and her ratty little Jeep. But how cool, what a cool grandma, right? So you see a couple differences. This photo on the right was taken in December of 1940, about a year before Pearl Harbor, and they're the same lookout. This is Thorn Point at 6,935 feet in what is now the Sespe Wilderness. Not reachable by vehicle, which I think is one of the reasons it has not fallen prey to vandalism and eventual destruction like so many of the others have. But just a great example, and later we'll have a little bit of a video clip of the walk up and kind of what you can see from there. And obviously, one of the great things about a lookout is they're put in like the prime location, right? Even if you're not a peak bagger, like somebody who goes after the tops of all the mountains, you can appreciate when you get there this really cool lookout and this piece of history and this structure that has a great story. It's not Chumash rock art, but it's still an archaeological registered item, and there's so many stories behind it, and they're all so great. And we could go on forever, but Ahmad says I have only a certain amount of time. So if you look at the map here, this is the map of the southern Los Padres, and I know on screen it probably comes out really small, but basically we're looking at the mid-Sisquoc down through like Lake Piru and Carpinteria and Lake Casitas, right? What we call the southern districts, the Ojai, the Mount Pinos, and the Santa Barbara district. And as recently as the 60s, there were like 20 lookouts just in this small section. This doesn't include San Luis Obispo County. It doesn't include the Big Sur unit, the Monterey district. But we had all these lookout towers, right? And as of, about 5 minutes ago, those numbers have reduced to 5. And of those, really you can get into 2 of these on a regular basis, maybe 3 if somebody's visiting or attending Slide Mountain. And while Slide Mountain is technically in the Los Padres, it's managed by the Angeles National Forest, who has a pretty robust volunteer program that looks after their lookouts, which I kind of wish we had here, right? So for the Santa Barbara crowd here, I'm appealing to the people in the slightly northern 805 because I'm a Ventura boy, of course. A lot of you know or are familiar with the Figueroa Mountain lookout. It's kind of like super not super impressive. It's mason bricks and it's enclosed and you can't visit it, and it's got a nice view, but it's not like a awe-inspiring lookout. It is actually the 3rd building on that structure. It's often referred to as the 2nd lookout. The original was built in the late 20s, and it was made out of timber. No metal frame, right? And when you think about its original role is to be for fire suppression. I know that's a little suspect, but and the building before it is shown here in the foreground, built around the turn of the century, last century. Was just a cabin, right? The view was pretty good, and then they built an official tower, and then that tower was replaced by the cinder block tower that we know now. Getting materials to these areas sometimes involved a vehicle or a truck if they had a road up to it, but some of them were out in the middle of nowhere. As an example, these are steel I-beams being dragged up to Kuyama Peak, which is a pretty remote location. And before the road was bladed, this was in 1930 or late 1933 and early 1934, and they had stock drag things up. Horses and mules would be have the beams put on their back, and they walked up Pine Mountain before Shell put the roads in. They carried freight, they carried supplies, they carried the cabinets and the windows, they carried the tanks, and they carried the stoves. You see in the bottom left, that guy, he's got the chimney flue for the stoves, and they carried those pieces 4 or 5 boards at a time until all the parts are up there, and then it was like a huge erector set to put it up, right? Obviously later, like this photo, even though it's out of our zone of conversation, at Chews Ridge, they used helicopters to drop off supplies, and that made things a little easier, obviously. In our local backcountry, many of you have probably driven the Camino Cielo, the west part of it, which includes Broadcast Peak if you hike up the Tequepas Trail from Lake Cachuma, and you may have driven over or visited on foot or mountain bike Santa Ynez Peak, which has all the broadcast assemblies, and there's webcams that you can look at what's going on with the weather. But originally, Santa Ynez Peak had this great 30-foot tower. This thing was impressive. And you look at it and you're like, okay, it's a pretty simple setup, right? It's got a nice flight of stairs, and it's supported, and it's got a 14 by 14 foot cabin. It's even got the little cabin. But the schematics for these are pretty mind blowing, and I don't know how well these will come out. I'm projecting it through Zoom, and you're looking at it on your device at home. I don't know how well these come out, but these drawings were so precise, hand rendered. This is pre-AutoCAD or digital CAD or anything. I think this sheet was one that was updated in May of 45, but they were so precise down to the inch on everything, and how the footings worked, and how the concrete worked, and how thick the door, and what kind of glass you're supposed to use for the panels, and how to protect those, the catwalk and the cab from storms, and how the hinges were to roll for the screen, for the window planks, all super detailed down to the circumference and drill hole size for the flue and the chimneys, which I just appreciate the attention to detail. And in my life, whenever something is well built, I'll say it's the Hoover Dam of something, but you could also say it's the fire lookout of something, because these are so detailed and so overbuilt. That's one of the reasons they've lasted 80-90 years despite the general neglect. The Forest Service, and I'm not disparaging them, but no maintenance is put on these lookouts at all, which is largely why a lot of them fall into disrepair. But man, they were so well built, and it's really cool. I love this stuff. So if we talk about the Santa Ynez, and here's this profile is a great, or elevation, sorry, is a great view of like every little detail and the mesh screens and everything that gets involved, right? But if we talk about Santa Ynez, and if you haven't been there before, very little is left of it other than the concrete footings, right? And they're surrounded by, I don't know, Verizon or whomever has the towers up there now, right? It's a beautiful view, and you could imagine if an enemy plane or fleet of planes were coming over the Channel Islands, they, barring some marine inversion layer obscurity, they would be the first to see it. One of the lookout sites nearest and dearest to kind of the old guard of our forest goers, and kind of the guys that I and other current amateur historians, the guys that we look to for information from back in the day, and that means the 60s, right? One of those nearest and dearest to them was the Medulce Peak lookout, 6,500 feet in elevation, great lookout, wood timbers, great view of the Alomar drainage, right? There was an article in the Santa Barbara News Press in the 70s about going up after the season and finding that it had been blown over, and then later they almost literally just bulldozed it off the side of the cliff. And again, now it's just down to the footings, and they flame cut the foot beams off. So if you stand there now, especially post Zaka fire, when there's quite a view, and then nothing left. Sad if that's your thing. So sad for me. If you travel west from there and go across the service road out to West Big Pine, there was another great lookout, which also had the AWS cabin. Just some fantastic history, and you can't imagine the stories that must have come from that, and not only the fire spotted, but the wildlife that used to be there, and being able to take shelter in one of these during a crazy Los Padres storm must have been pretty spectacular. I'm not sure I'd get in one now, given how rickety some of them are. I think I'd be worried it'd collapse on me. One of the more popular hikes off of in the Figueroa Mountain area is McKinley Mountain. And for those of you who have done that hike, when you get to you walk up the road from Cachuma Saddle, and then you get to the San Raf Wilderness boundary, and you kind of go over your right shoulder and climb up to McKinley Mountain. There used to be a lookout there as well, which a lot of people, I don't think, realize. And this is one of the old, what they call the cupola style. It was a cabin on the ground, and it had a little room upstairs where the lookout would go and keep an eye out on things. And this is a classic fire lookout, less so for airplane spotting, but it was also pressed into use the same way. The main building there collapsed in the 60s. And now if you go there, there's just, some of the rocks are gathered together, and there's a couple timbers remaining, but still pretty commanding views, really cool view of the Cold Spring Bridge. And, a great day hike for those of you in that stretch of the forest. Above the Santa Ynez upper rec area is Camusa Peak, which isn't a popular day hike area, but I know a lot of OHV riders like to go up there, and it's a good cardio workout if that's your thing. A lot of mountain bikers visit it, but there used to be a lookout there as well. That location is probably better known for being the impact site of one of the B-26 Liberator crashes during the Second World War. And if you don't have it, and if you're interested in that kind of thing, one of our local historians, Bob Burtness, wrote a great book called the Santa Barbara B-26 Disasters, which is a book about the kind of the chain of events, and how the three crashes of three different B-26 Liberators were all intermeshed. It's a fascinating story, and a great historical yarn if you're into that kind of thing. Now, if you live in Santa Barbara and you ever look up at the mountains, right, you see La Cumbre Peak, and most people know that there's a fire lookout there. This is the original La Cumbre Peak lookout from the 1920s. The one that we know now is it looks more like an air traffic control tower, and it was actually a prototype built in I think 1945, and at the time it was one of the most expensive. It cost hundreds of dollars more than the others, right? And this is its construction in the 40s, while the other one still stood there. Both obviously have a great view, given how it just drops off. It goes from La Cumbre to Cathedral Peak, and then down Arlington and overlooking Mission Canyon, and it has a commanding view of all of Santa Barbara. But a really special spot where even now you can visit and really soak up the views. La Cumbre is probably historically one of my favorites. Now though, it might be my least favorite. It's they've cut they flame torched the stairs off. I think Cox Communication has owned the property since 82, and with all its broadcast equipment, I understand the radiation there is probably unsafe. So not one to climb in, but still a cool historical site to visit. For those further north, closer to Santa Maria, who might drive the 166 out into the forest toward New Kuyama, but stopping short of Taft, I'm sure. Miranda Pine had a great lookout, and this is another one of those cupola style ones. And then, though not visible to those not hiking, one of the kind of the crown jewels of that stretch was the lookout at Salisbury Potrero. And the cool story here was it was a fire lookout and pressed into service as an aircraft warning lookout as well. And after the war, one of the local ranchers or leaseholders purchased it from, I don't know, the War Department or the federal government or maybe just the Forest Service, and put it on skids and had it dragged over to one of his holdings near Black Willow Spring. And it's at the head of what is now called the Jackson Canyon, that goes down into the Sisquoc. And it's still there. This photo was taken about 10 or 15 years ago. Kind of fallen apart. Not, I wouldn't stay in it for maybe concern of rats, spiders, snakes, other things, but slowly deteriorating. This photo was taken last month when I was there with my Boy Scouts. We went in and checked it out. A pretty cool stretch. It's a hot hike in the summer. It's a better spring hike. You can start from McPherson Peak or from Aliso Park campground and hike in, spend a night at one of the adjacent trail camps. But a cool piece of history. Another one that has had an earlier iteration and then has been replaced is Fraser Mountain. That's above Fraser Park, off of the 5 in the Gorman area, and kind of the north eastern corner of our local part of the forest. That's in the Mount Pinos Ranger District. And it's great because you can actually drive to this one. It too is surrounded by Verizon communication towers and whoever else might own those arrays. So it's not the biggest building or biggest structure there any longer, but it's still a pretty sweet spot. Condors have been seen from this vantage point. Last time I went up, I actually went up in the winter right before the road was closed. And the mattresses are still there. You'll see there's this structure in the foreground on the right where somebody has scribbled "free." That is the old stand for the Osborne Firefinder, which is an alidade used for the lookout to kind of figure out where a fire that he or she may witness was. And I have a better photo of that here I'll show in a bit. But I love, like, the wind was howling when we were up there, so you can see how the rime and the frost is blowing off the old switches in the photos. And I was a little reluctant to go out onto the catwalk just because the wind was blowing so much. I didn't want to get blown off the side. All the windows are blown out. You know, it's probably got lead paint and not much going on there, but a special place to visit nonetheless. And then Thorn Point, again, it's great because it hasn't been as beat up as the others. You can still go inside. This is a photo from 1953 where you can see the cabin on the left has gotten a fresh coat of paint. It's a photo from 1973. You can see somebody's horse packed in and it was in great shape. And now, if you'll indulge me, I have a video of a walk up of this. Before I share that, though, I want to point out these stairs. You see the stairs on the left here from this photo from the 70s. They don't have any of the vertical parts of the stairs. What are those called? Risers, I think. Right. So as you're going up the stairs, you're looking through the stairs, right? So it feels a little bit like a ladder. I'm telling you now, if you hike with dogs like I do, man, they do not like that at all. My dogs are, I like to think, among the bravest of trail dogs. And there was like 2 steps on that. And she was like, you know what, Dad, I'm gonna wait down here for you. You go ahead and do this silly opposable thumb stuff that you do up there. So if it doesn't always take, but let's see if it runs. Oh, it does. Good. So you'll see right at the foot there's that little beige box. That is the archaeological register, and they ask you to sign in. And you can see my dog waiting for me there, thinking, you're an idiot, Dad. Sometimes the floor has a trap door right there. Sometimes that's closed. That doesn't mean you're not allowed to enter. It just means it fell down. So you're welcome to push that up, prop it open. But you'll see the window shutters, many of them have blown off. We won't do a tour of the interior here, but here we're looking south to stand by. Here we're looking south toward the Pacific, right? Marine layer. So I wouldn't see the planes coming today, but I'd see them if they got close enough. And you can see way down there, Rose Valley, the 33, the backside of Nordoff Ridge here. And if you were really good with your eyes, that rounded mountain just to the right, now left of that post, is Nordoff. You can see Mutah Flat out there. You can see Cobblestone Mountain. And if you know where to look, you can see the 5. But the views here are just gobsmackingly beautiful. And on a clear day, you could spend hours just, pointing out. Pardon my friend who's still got a flip phone. He's embarrassing. I'm sorry. But there's so many great views. And, from there, you're at one of the highest points in that stretch of the forest. You can see everything. It's great. And on a clear day, you can see 7 of the 8 islands. Just one is obscured by Palos Verdes. I think one of the, not Catalina even, I think it's like Clemente or Nicholas, one of the military islands you can't quite see, but great views. All right. One of the more famous lookouts, especially in the Santa Barbara crowd, is Kuyama Peak, which also built in 1934. It was the one earlier where the mules were hauling the I-beams, the steel beams up. And Kuyama was one of my favorites. It was a great mountain bike ride. You could drive out there and ride up the service road. It's a great workout. It had an AWS cabin that was like in a real, I felt, sketchy position, right on the edge of the mountain. If something went wrong or you finally got that big earthquake, man, you were going for a ride. Alas, it collapsed before the earthquake arrived. Bummer. And during the Zaka fire, I think this photo is one that Ray Ford took during his coverage of the Zaka fire. Efforts were made to protect it. They wrapped it. It was spared the fire, and I was like, oh, that's great. Went up and visited, did a couple service projects, cleaning up micro trash because condors are known to, land and roost in the area, and condors tend to eat anything shiny. And then one winter, a buddy of mine said, "Hey, I just hiked up to Kuyama, and bummer, the winds got it." It just, I don't want to say out of the blue, because if you don't maintain something, I guess it's to be expected, but it was a bummer. Just, it had kind of imploded on itself. And it's, only gotten worse with time. Still had commanding views. My dogs love it. Not much left. This might be a video. Oh, that's got noise though. You don't want to listen to me ramble through here. This is me trying to crawl underneath and not having much luck. Tile still there. Stove was still there. Luckily, the stairs stayed intact long enough for me to crawl around. But really sad given its history and for how long I'd visited it with my brothers and with my fellow scouts as a kid, because it was a really cool spot. No, we don't need that one. For my Ojai area peeps, this is your beloved Nordoff lookout. And this is the first iteration. This is not like a Bambi quiz. What kind of deer is that? Sorry. So Nordoff had a lookout for years, from the 40s on, and it burned in the 1948 Wheeler Springs fire. And then what I think is a really cool little bit of trivia, and something I just wish there were a video of, was a few decades earlier, or maybe a few years earlier, the Forest Service had sold some of its land. It sold some land in the Kuyama area to oil interests, and it sold some of its land around Carpinteria to various interests. So what we call Rincon Mountain used to have a lookout on it. And so if you're driving the 101 down from Carp, and when you get around to Bates, there's that mountain on your left right before you get to the county line where all the communications arrays are. That's Rincon Mountain. It used to have a lookout. So when the original Nordoff Peak lookout burned in the 48 Wheeler Spring fire, there was like a spare lookout sitting on Rincon Mountain that was, on somebody else's property, but the structure, I guess, was still property of the Department of Agriculture. So they took a heavy lift helicopter, and this is before Lake Casitas existed, right? Unbolted everything, clipped it up, and they flew it across Casitas Valley, pre-lake, all the way over to Ojai, and landed and installed that one as the second iteration at Nordoff. And I would love if somehow there were video of that. Could you imagine seeing a helicopter go across the Ojai Valley with a lookout tower chained or cabled to its underside? So cool. So photo of Nordoff from the 70s. Those of you who hike up to it or mountain bike up to it now know it's just the superstructure, right? You can actually drive up to it. You can get a permit from the Ojai district to drive up to it, and it's a great camp spot for, for a family or two, or for a scout crew. Just great views, great stargazing, and again, great views, right? If you get a clear day, great for the stargazing too. And during the day fire, as the condors were being stressed out of the Sespe Condor Sanctuary just east, a lot of them came to roost and were visible at the Nordoff Tower, right? And some contacts of mine got some really, really impressive photos. And it was funny because I was telling that to a group of my Cub Scouts a few years ago. And I was like, oh, guys, you know how sometimes we go on these service projects and we pick up the little bits of glass and we pick up the little bits of, bottle caps and junk and shell casings and broken bits of targets that people leave behind. And we do that because the condors will pick it up and eat it and then either regurgitate it to their young, which then kills their young, or, they get lead poisoning from chewing on bullets and all these things, right? And, when you're 9, your first reaction to hearing that, oh, you're doing this work and sometimes condors are here. When you're 9, you're like, oh, maybe a condor will come visit us. And obviously my job as a cynical scout leader is like, no, Bobby, condors are super rare. There's only 400 of them out there and blah, blah, blah. No chance. And like, I'm not even done saying that. And some kid goes, look, I bet you that's a condor over there. And, some vultures flying toward us. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys, you're so romantics. Yeah, no, he was right. Condor flew over us right at that moment at Nordoff, which I thought was super cool. Later, we tracked this one, and I forget the name of it, but there's a website that the Friends of the California Condor, I think, runs, or maybe the Audubon Society, where with their radio telemetry and their tags, they actually track the flight patterns of all the condors that they have tagged, which is pretty cool. So anyway, yeah, Cub Scouts for the win on that one. Later, I found out that some of my Cubs climbed down a dangerous distance down to down the slope where they had bulldozed a bunch of stuff, and they found the old Westinghouse 4-burner stove. So they came back up to me with all the gas fittings that they found on the stove. Great, thanks, guys. Another one that's a little more difficult to reach, largely because the trails leading up to it are now blocked by private property, or even the longer route, the trail is not maintained, is Santa Paula Peak. One of the coolest sights, though, and a great hike. This burned in the 1948 Wheeler fire as well, with the lookout barely escaping. And that one's just a bunch of noise, sorry. And then in the 06 fire, further east to that, is the one that probably saw the least traffic. This is Topa Topa Peak. It burned in 2006 during the day fire. And it was built, it was like the special, well, I like to say the red-bearded stepchild, but it was special in that it was so remote, even by forest standards, that it cost extra money, and took an extra 2 years to build. So when they had all these lookouts that they were building in 34, this one wasn't completed until, I believe, 36. And it was a heck of a hoof to get there. But again, a fantastic position, right? Then in 51 and 52, when the Sespe Condor Sanctuary was expanded, suddenly it's in an area into which, human entry is verboten unless you have cause or you're there on official business. So it really only saw public use for about 15 years, and then became something of a time capsule. Every once in a while, maybe search and rescue would get there looking for somebody who'd gone way off trail. Sometimes gear was stored there, but you look at that interior, it's just immaculate, right? Everything is still there. Alas, it burned in the day fire, and now it's just down to the superstructure. And even there, while you can still see the table underneath, the mesh floor, the metal floor, isn't there any longer. So even if you climb the stairs, you can't like walk across the platform, which is a shame. And then finally, I want to share a couple photos of just stuff that I've stumbled across over the years, digging up some research and whatnot. One, I want everyone here to appreciate the cool factor of this lookout. This photo was taken, I believe, in the late 40s. Look at this guy in full denim, right? Denim jacket, denim jeans. He's got a nice watch on. He's got his leather gloves back pocket, slicked back hair. I mean, this guy makes Fonzarelli look like a dork, right? This guy is the epitome of cool. And the tool that he and his compatriot here are using is the Osborne Firefinder. It's a map cut out and put onto a circular dish that rotates, where they can line up. They've got these brass readers and wires where they can line up and call in the precise location of a suspected fire. Now, while you look at this and sit in awe of this guy's cool factor, I also want you to appreciate, bottom left, this guy's got a Better Homes and Garden cookbook in his office. That guy's cool, right? So a couple of years ago, I was talking to that guy's super cool, let me just say. So a couple of years ago, I was talking to a retired ranger and firefighter from the Los Padres, who I believe now lives up in Oregon. And he found some photos for me of somebody selling an old lookout phone, right? And he's like, hey, check out these photos. Aren't they cool? And I was like, oh, these are cool. Oh, look, LP. Oh, Los Padres, right? So we open it up, we were cranking through these photos of this guy's, I don't know where he got it, but he's selling it on eBay. And this is the type of phone that the earlier cool guy in the denim would use, right? It was in a box, had its ringer in the box. And what I love, and I don't know how well this will come out, but it doesn't just have the 10 codes for the radio, like, 10-4 good buddy kind of stuff, but it's got an index on the right here of all the lookouts and where they were located, and the pre-area code style, right? Of how you can call the Ojai Ranger Station and how you can call the warehouse and the lookouts and whatnot. Super cool. So this guy, mad props. Now here's another photo of, and I think this is from Cone Mountain in the northern Los Padres, but this is an example of what the office and the interior would have looked like in the 20s. And this is actually from, I think, Buck Rock in the Sequoia National Forest. This shows a very, very well preserved Osborne Firefinder. Look, even the brass is polished with the map in line, so you can rotate that whole thing, get a location, and be good to go. And please appreciate, this guy's got the electric range here, not just the gas range like our guys would have had. And then last here is, this is a photo that one of the rec officers from the Ojai district found some years ago and forwarded on to us. This was from the Santa Paula lookout when the ranger, who barely escaped with his life, kind of jumped off the side and took off. He was able to take the rangefinder with him, and later the map is an updated map from later in forest history, but this was salvaged from the Santa Paula Peak lookout. So great stuff. And Ahmad, in the interest of not talking forever, those dishes are done. All right. So we could talk forever about that. So I'm gonna stop my share now, and then
let's talk about the denim. I was over here.
I know the denim's cool, man.
The denim, yes.
I love it. There's another one that I didn't include photos of, and one of my favorite day hikes is the Reyes Peak lookout, which is up on Pine Mountain. It's kind of a sad story because it was built from native timbers. It was built in 1927, one of the earlier ones. And then up until kind of these last 20 years have just been, it feels like we're on fire all the time, right? Like California is just constantly burning. It was built in 27 of native timbers from, the big sugar pines that are up there. And then in 1932, when the Matilaha fire, which for decades, like 80 years, was the largest fire in state history, it was burning down below, but the marine layer was so thick they didn't know it until it was like coming up the mountain at them. And I was remiss in not including photos of that. But anybody who wants to do a good and fairly short hike to a really cool historic spot, that's one of them. It's still got the old cot is still down there. The ranger's cot is on the side. Some of the roof pieces are out in the field. There has been no cleanup. It's pretty sweet.
No, that's great. So I want to encourage anyone with any questions to please put them in the chat or the actual Q&A. But looks like we have some questions here already. So there's a question here is, can you share, I guess I want to kind of expand on this question. Can you share the coordinates for this spot? And the spot they're referring to, I believe, was the first lookout picture that you posted with the what it looks like now versus what it looks like then. But to expand on that, if someone wants to, what's a good resource to look up like these coordinates? Is there a special site?
You know what, there is, oh, you know what, there is, and I'd have to Google it real quick. There's a guy who actually runs a lookout site. I think his name's Richard Carey. No relation, though. It's a great name. I think if you go to peakbagging.com, there's a list of like, he has them listed by like region, and you can, say Southern California and then lookouts, and then he'll give you the latitude and longitude. And it's a very simple old school site, but here I'll include it here. Did that go to just you? That might have just gone to you. Sorry. Here, I'll send it again. Here we go. And that'll give you a table with location, benchmark data, the whole thing. I think if you go to table 2, it's a simple site, but it's got a lot of cool intel on it. And for the person asking, yikes, it's hard to tell. I showed the before and after, but I don't know which.
I guess they wanted to ask what, I guess it's the Thorn.
Oh, Point. Thorn Point, yeah.
What is the best way to get to Thorn Point is the question that they're asking.
One, Thorn Point it's a bit of a drive. You got to go out to Grade Valley. So you're going to take Lockwood Valley Road out to Grade Valley Road and then head south from there. And you're going to go to the end of, I think it's 710 North C or something, where you can find this if you have the Tom Harris and Sespe Wilderness map. You can find Thorn Point there. Or, shameless plug, the hike is detailed in the latest and greatest hiking guide. Wait, here we go. Shameless plug.
Full title on this,
or you can find it here.
Yes. We'll give the full title again for the.
No, we've only got half an hour. That it takes longer than that.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna plug it here. This is the newly revised Hiking and Backpacking Santa Barbara and Ventura, a complete guide to the trails of the Southern Los Padres National Forest.
Well done. Take a breath. Great. So from there you'll come to Thorn Meadows, which is kind of a beat up old car camp. You don't need 4-wheel drive, but it doesn't hurt, or at least have decent, like Subaru level clearance, because there are a couple creeks and sometimes they can be rather deep on your way there. And then the hike is only 3.5 miles one way, but it's a little deceptive because, and Ahmad, this is the one that to which I alluded earlier when you and I were chatting offline, when I had my Girl Scouts on one of their last hikes before they all headed off to college. It's this beautiful cedar and ponderosa pine and Jeffrey pine and sugar pine shaded hike, right? And you're like, all right, well, it looks steep on the map, but the first mile is super level. So you're okay, maybe it's not as bad as you think. And then that last 2 miles, you're gaining almost 2,000 vertical feet. So it's like Stairmaster 5000. It's ridiculous. But you'll climb up, coming from the northeast, and you come up the backside, and it's a great hike. It's a hoof. You give yourself all day and take plenty of water. All day, because you also have to make the drive, which is not short. But yeah, look up Thorn Point. You can find it in the book. You can find it in that Peak Bagging website. It's a great hike. It's probably my favorite day hike in all of the Los Padres, to be honest. Yeah. What else you got for me? Hit me.
We got some more here. So this one is a good question too. What was the tour of duty for the fire lookouts, and what was a season like? Would you insight into that?
Yeah, I probably can't speak a whole lot to that. But the season was spring to fall, because in the winter you couldn't get up there. Anything that's high elevation enough, well, for the most part, anything that's high elevation enough to be a lookout would be in the snow in the backcountry, right? Like Mount Pinos and Medulce Peak, West Pine. Those will all be snowed in, and not reachable. During the war, my understanding is that you would be on for 12 hours, and a lot of those were volunteers, and in fact, a lot of those were staffed by were staffed by women, because that was, you know, not a combat role. So there were a lot of lookouts who were stationed up there, or husband-wife teams would be up there. And there are actually a couple that are still staffed up north. You know, those of you who visit like Lake Lopez or the San Luis Obispo Atascadero area, High Mountain has the whole Condor project, and there's I think Chews Ridge is still staffed most of the year, and those might be the only two. And then Slide Mountain, which I alluded to earlier. Slide Mountain is the newest of the lookouts near Pyramid Lake, and it was built in '69, helicoptered in, went out of service within 10 years because of air quality. One, you couldn't see very far in the LA smog, but also radio and technology kind of made it obsolete. Sorry, but to get back to the question, day in the life was, you know, you're spending a lot of time what they call lensing or spotting, right? Looking through the glass, making calls, checking in on things. There was a pretty famous guy who just recently passed, rest in peace, Bob Carlson, who's a really cool guy, who was a Medulce lookout in the early 40s as a late teen and early in his early 20s. And you can, if you do a little Googling, you can probably find some of his accounts. There were a couple newspaper articles after his passing about his time. You have to be good with being alone, for sure, right? But for a lot of people who enjoy the forest, I think we would all agree there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. They're not always the same thing, right?
Yeah. So. Well, I was waiting for you to drop the denim requirement for the.
Oh yeah, I feel underdressed, right? I got like my plaid going on here.
So I know we talked a little bit about this one. Are any of the towers manned during the summer, but more of how about the Sierra Nevada towers? And does the USFS still utilize any of the towers?
Yeah, I'm not super qualified to speak out, you know, kind of beyond the Los Padres, but yes, in the Sierra, a lot of the towers are still used. I know the Buck Ridge Tower, or Buck Point. I've been there 3 or 4 times. It's been staffed every time I've been there, and they still do use a lot of those. I know the Plumas National Forest still uses it, the Willamette National Forest. Yeah, Los Padres is kind of we seem to be the exception in that. And to be fair, I mean, really, what's left to burn? Sorry, that's horrible, but it's like, I feel like we're on fire all the time here. So our lookouts aren't in service any longer, and are not staffed and are not maintained. But a lot of the other forests where that kind of fire suppression still has a huge value, they are. And there's websites, and there's fans, and forest fire lookout associations up and down. Actually, there's the FFLA, the Forest Fire Lookout Association, which actually does great work in restoration. The San Bernardino Forest and the Cleveland National Forest and the Angeles National Forest, which are the other 3 of the 4 Southern California national forests, all preserve theirs pretty well. So.
There was another question that came up about family-friendly hikes along the southern Los Padres. Is there any that you can recommend?
Oh, there's a ton. Yeah, that boy, we could do a whole presentation on that. So depending on where you are, yes. First, a lot of the hikes, like Cold Spring Canyon above Westmont, is a great spot. Matilaha Canyon is great. A lot of them I would avoid in the summer, not only because of heat and lack of water, but the bugs tend to be not necessarily enough to make a kid not want to be there. But in the spring and fall, just mind the poison oak and the snakes. Matilaha is great because you can hike half a mile and you'll have crossed the creek twice, right? And if you've got little legs, or as we call them, Captain Short Legs, hiking with you, water is the #1 attraction for kids, right? They're not interested in hot tubs. They're not interested in a good party scene. They just want to go play in the water and jump off rocks, right? And play with sticks, and it's great. So Matilaha, yes, great. Cold Spring is great. Some of the hikes, if you're looking to do like a easy overnighter with maybe like a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, and they're just starting to get into backpacking. You can go down to Four Bush Flat, which is only 1.5 miles in. If you're in the Ojai area, Potrero John, which is only 1.5 miles in. There's a lot of easy, good spots. And again, not to push the book, but if you do get it, guys, get it from the library, borrow it from the library. There's a section, I think it's called Great Hikes for Little Explorers. Let's see what I called it. But there's a section that kind of gives you a rundown of good hikes for kids. It says Great Hikes for Little Explorers. Look at that. Wait, there it is.
There it is.
Great
Hikes for Little. It's newly revised.
It is newly revised.
So it's updated as it can get.
It is, and with the caveat that, the moment something goes in print, it's out of date, right? Things change. But my favorite part of this new book actually is the fact that the interiors are now color, and that was a big deal. The first book, it was all grayscale, black and white. But nice. I am so pleased with the photos in this one. They came out really nice. Yeah.
And then there was out of the lookout towers, in terms of I'd say ease of access, which would you recommend as a more ease of access?
Well, if you did them in order, the easiest ones of the 5 that are still like full towers, the easiest ones are obviously the ones to drive to, right? Mm-hmm. So for the Santa Barbara crowd, I'd say La Cumbre Peak. In fact, wasn't it up until like last year, somebody had left a piano there and people could go up to the top and play a piano there at the peak. And only recently did they remove that. La Cumbre Peak, because it's right above, it's off of the Camino there. And then Fig Mountain, you can also drive to, but it's kind of underwhelming. You can drive to Fraser Mountain, and then both Slide Mountain and Thorn Point require a bit of a hoof of a hike. Slide Mountain's off the 5, effectively off the old highway, and Thorn Point is 10 miles on dirt and then a 7-mile round trip hike. As far as the others, like the superstructures, if you want a great view, it's a 6-mile hoof from the front side of Ojai if you come out of like the Stewart Debris Basin there, the Pratt Trailhead, and hike 6 miles up to the Nordoff platform. So Nordoff's probably the most famous or the most popular of the lookout destinations, even though it doesn't have the cab anymore. It just has the platform, but you can hike up, you can walk to the top and soak up the views. It's a cool spot. Yeah.
Okay.
Hope that answered that question.
No, that's great.
Cool.
Everyone's taking notes, and like I said, this is recorded, so.
Oh, right on.
Greg throwing out all these terms out there. It's okay. We'll rewind.
A lot of place names I know got thrown out there.
No, it's all right. During the summer months, how often are you getting into the deeper backcountry areas?
I'll be honest, not a ton, especially in the last few years with the drought. Not having water is tough enough, but then with all the fire restrictions, the stove restrictions, and because I like to hike with dogs, not having enough water for them. I pushed it a bit when I was finishing up the second edition, because you have a deadline, you got to get it done, right? But right now I'm going high elevation because it's cooler up there. So I'm spending a lot of time atop Pine Mountain and Mount Pinos because they're both above 7,000 feet, actually 7,000 and 8,000 feet respectively. But a lot of the backcountry is pretty boiling hot, and I am not built for the heat, I'll be honest. If you go and you don't mind the heat, just, please be careful, stay hydrated, know where you're going, let people know where you're going to be, what your plan is. If you have an inReach or a Spot or some other kind of satellite communications device, take it with you so you can update if there's a change in plans. The Los Padres in the summer can be pretty brutal. And with water as scarce as it's been these last few summers, I'm a little hesitant. I get out in the spring and I'm gone all the time. In the fall, I love. In the winter, not a problem. Summer's tough.
Summer is.
Yeah, it's tough.
Okay, that looks like I don't see any more questions here. To give it, maybe if anyone has any final questions, we can try to
hit it
through. We have Craig is answering all of these. all the questions.
No guarantees any of that's correct. I don't even know. Where are we talking about? Where have we been?
What's a tower again? Well, while we're waiting for this last question, just want to plug again. So Craig has a newly revised Hiking and Backpacking Santa Barbara and Ventura is the title of the book, a complete guide to the trails of the southern Los Padres National Forest. And also, if you want to check out Craig's trip reports and other news, resources and updates to Craig puts out on his website. It's craigrcarey.net. You can see if we put that in the chat here for everybody. And where can we watch? This will be posted on the library's YouTube channel here in a few days. We will post it once we conclude. We'll record. Let's see here. I don't see this one. What about Manzana Mount Lookout on the SLRD? I don't know that.
Oh, that's the Santa Lucias Ranger District. Yeah, the Manzana Lookout. I don't have a whole lot of updated intel. Whoever asked that question, there are some guys who follow those kind of central section of the Los Padres. In fact, the High Mountain crew and the LPFA would probably have the most updated on that. I do have a lot of cool historical photos of it, but no conditions as far as reaching the old site.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to say thank you, Craig. Wonderful presentation, very informative. You are truly one of our experts who we can go to.
That's awesome. A low bar. Awesome.
If I get lost out there, I wouldn't want to see you the one that rescues me.
Right on, like Tarzan. Cool.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate
thanks
it.
to you, and thanks to James. I don't know if he was here this evening, but for him to put me in contact with you guys again, and thanks to everybody who came and hung out and put up with my rambling and overly speedy delivery on some of this. So
it was great. Next time we got to rock the denim, Craig, when we do this.
You know what? I think we will. and the what do they call that? The pompadour, right?
Go.
The super greased back hair. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, let's do it.
Right on. I like it.
Anyways, thank you, Craig. Thank you, everyone, for attending and sticking along. And all the websites there, craigrcarey.net. And perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Cool. Good night, all. Thanks again.
Good night. Be safe out there.